You're standing above the clouds, higher than any point on Earth. The air is thin. Your breath feels like it's being sucked from your lungs, and your heart is pounding like a war drum. Every step takes all the willpower you've got left. Then, suddenly, the snow beneath you shifts. Your vision blurs. You've just stepped into the death zone, without oxygen. At this altitude, your brain starts to shut down. Your muscles turn to jelly. Some climbers begin hallucinating, talking to people who aren't there. Others walk straight off cliffs, convinced they're on a path to safety. There are over 200 bodies frozen in time on Everest, some lying right beside the trail. They were once just like you, driven, excited, maybe even overconfident. So here's the question. What if you tried to climb Everest without oxygen? What would happen to your body? Could you survive the death zone? And why have only a tiny handful of people in history ever managed to do it? This is the story of what it really takes to conquer the world's tallest mountain with nothing but your breath. Mount Everest rises 8,848 meters into the sky, so high that commercial jets fly just a little above it. But beyond 8,000 meters, climbers enter a place so hostile to life, it's been given a chilling name, the death zone. Here, the atmosphere holds only a third of the oxygen found at sea level. Your lungs can't pull in enough air no matter how fast you breathe. It feels like trying to survive with a plastic bag over your head. Doctors once believed the summit of Everest was simply unclimbable without oxygen, that the human body couldn't function in such an environment, even at rest. And yet, climbers go there, every year. Some return, some don't. The death zone is where most fatalities happen, usually on the way down. Fatigue sets in. The brain slows, one wrong step, and that's it. This is also where you'll find the infamous Rainbow Valley, a section of Everest littered with tents, oxygen tanks, and the bodies of climbers still wearing their brightly colored gear. There's no rescue team. No helicopter will come. In the death zone, you are on your own. Hey, real quick, when was the last time you did something unforgettable? Viator makes it crazy easy to book real adventures. Everest Base Camp, Kilimanjaro, Tokyo, everything. I actually used it myself, and no joke, best decision I've ever made. Don't just watch other people live life, go live yours. Links below. The moment you step into the death zone, your body begins to lose a battle it can't win. This isn't just about feeling tired. This is your entire system starting to shut down. The most dangerous enemy is something called hypoxia, oxygen deprivation. Your brain, your muscles, even your organs, they're all starving for air. The higher you go, the more everything slows. Thinking becomes a chore. Memory slips. Simple decisions, like whether to drink water or keep walking, can feel like solving a puzzle after staying awake for 3 straight days. Your heart rate skyrockets. Your blood thickens as your body tries to pump more red blood cells for oxygen delivery. But thicker blood means your heart has to work even harder. Some climbers report resting heart rates above 120 while lying still in their tents. And that's not all. At this altitude, the simple act of standing can feel like a workout. Walking a few meters can leave you gasping. Climbers often describe it as moving in slow motion, like time has stretched and gravity is pulling twice as hard. Your muscles begin to weaken, your body starts cannibalizing itself for energy, and your coordination suffers. The scariest part? You may not even notice how far gone you really are. That's why Everest claims lives without warning. Your mind is the first to go, and you might not even realize you're in trouble until it's far too late. The death zone has no mercy, and Everest doesn't forgive mistakes. In 1999, 22-year-old Michael Matthews became the youngest Brit to summit Everest. It should have been the achievement of a lifetime. But during his descent, something went wrong. He vanished into a storm and was never seen again. His family believes he died from oxygen deprivation after using faulty oxygen canisters that may have frozen at altitude. And he's not alone. Over 300 people have died on Everest, the vast majority in the death zone. Many are still there. The brutal terrain makes recovery nearly impossible. The most infamous is Green Boots, a body lying inside a small cave wearing bright green climbing shoes. For years, climbers had to step over him on the trail to the summit. His real name was Tsewang Paljor, and he died in 1996 during a deadly storm. One of 8 people who didn't make it back that day. Then there's Rainbow Valley, a beautiful name for something haunting. It's a stretch of the mountain just below the summit where the snow is littered with oxygen bottles, shredded tents, and the frozen bodies of climbers, their gear still bright against the white landscape. These stories are not legends, they're not metaphors, they're warnings. When your mind is fogged, your body broken, and the weather turns, Everest decides whether you live or die. And if you're not using oxygen, that decision comes even faster. In 1978, the world watched two men attempt what was considered scientifically impossible, climbing Everest without a single breath of supplemental oxygen. Their names were Reinhold Messner and Peter HAPE. Scientists warned them not to go. Medical experts said their brains could melt down from lack of oxygen. HAPE was sick from food poisoning, vomiting, and hallucinating at high camp. He wanted to turn back. But Messner, he pushed forward. Their final push was pure suffering. They couldn't talk. Too much breath wasted. They used hand signals instead. Every few meters, they collapsed into the snow. HAPE began hallucinating. Messner described the sensation as if his body was exploding, saying later, "I am nothing more than a single, narrow, gasping lung." But they did it. They reached the summit, barely, and they proved the world wrong. 2 years later, Messner returned, alone, no teammates, no Sherpas, no oxygen. It took him days. He carried everything himself, including the fear of dying without help. On August 20th, 1980, he became the first human to summit Everest solo and without oxygen. He reached the top, fell into the snow, and passed out, not from the cold, but from exhaustion. He later woke up puffing desperately and somehow found the strength to descend. These are not superhumans. These are people who redefined what was possible. And even they nearly didn't make it back. If there's one group of people who seem built for Everest, it's the Sherpas. They don't just survive in the death zone, they thrive. For generations, Sherpas have lived at high altitude in the Himalayas, and over time their bodies have adapted in extraordinary ways. They carry oxygen tanks, food, and gear for other climbers, often while those climbers are struggling just to stand. But it's not just training or toughness, it's in their DNA. Sherpas have a unique version of a gene called EPAS1, nicknamed the super athlete gene. It allows their bodies to use oxygen far more efficiently. While others gasp for breath at 8,000 meters, Sherpas move with an ease that seems almost unnatural. Their blood is better at transporting oxygen. Their heart rate stays more stable. Their mitochondria, those tiny power plants in your cells, are more efficient under pressure. They don't produce as many red blood cells in response to altitude, which might sound bad, but it actually protects them. Thicker blood can be deadly. Sherpas skip that danger entirely. This genetic edge is so powerful that even elite Western climbers acknowledge it. Without the Sherpas, most Everest summits would never happen. They're the silent heroes of the mountain, leading the way, carrying the load, and guiding people through the most dangerous terrain on Earth, while the rest of the world still struggles to breathe. Climbing Everest with oxygen is dangerous. Climbing it without oxygen is flirting with death. At extreme altitude, your body isn't just tired, it's failing, and that's when the real killers show up. The first is HAPE, high altitude pulmonary edema. Fluid leaks into your lungs, making every breath a choking struggle. Climbers describe it as drowning while standing. There's no warning, no pain, just panic as your lungs fill, your oxygen drops, and your legs give out. Then there's HACE, high altitude cerebral edema. This one attacks your brain. You become confused, disoriented. You might forget where you are. Some climbers hallucinate. Some try to take off their clothes in sub-zero temperatures. Others start walking toward the edge of cliffs, convinced it's the right way down. And here's the terrifying truth. The only cure for either of these conditions is immediate descent. But how do you descend when you can't walk? When you can't think straight? When your legs don't move and the wind is howling and the temperature is dropping by the minute? Even healthy climbers without symptoms start to deteriorate quickly at this altitude. Muscles waste away. Vision can blur. Judgment disappears. One misstep, one bad decision, and the mountain doesn't give second chances. Without oxygen, all of this happens faster and more brutally. This is why almost every climber who attempts an oxygen-free ascent spends months training, planning, and praying. Because in the death zone, mistakes aren't setbacks. They're fatal. Climbing Everest without oxygen isn't just a physical challenge. It's a test of everything you are. You can't just show up and climb. To even stand a chance, you need to rebuild your body from the ground up. Months, sometimes years, of training your cardiovascular system, increasing your VO2 max, and learning how to move efficiently at altitude. Then comes acclimatization. It's not optional. Climbers spend weeks going up and down the mountain in stages, forcing their bodies to adapt. Your red blood cell count rises, your body starts conserving energy, but every step still takes more effort than you think is possible. Now take all that preparation and strip away the oxygen tanks. That means no backup, no safety net. You carry less because weight matters, but that means less food, less water, fewer warm layers. You're lighter but also more exposed, alone. And without oxygen, there's no margin for error. You move slower, fatigue sets in earlier, and you can't afford to hesitate. Every minute you spend above 8,000 meters, the clock is ticking. Not in hours, but in breaths. This is where elite climbers separate from the rest. Not because they're stronger, but because they're disciplined. Every movement is calculated, every choice is deliberate. You climb with your legs, but you survive with your brain. And even then, survival is never guaranteed. By now, your body is drained, muscles failing, fingers numb, your brain foggy. But what really keeps climbers going in the death zone, especially without oxygen, is something far deeper than strength. It's mental survival. Climbers talk about it often. The overwhelming need to lie down and sleep in the snow. Not because they're lazy, but because their brains are tricking them, luring them into rest that would mean never waking up. This is where mental routines come in, lifelines inside your own head. Some climbers repeat mantras, others count steps, just 20 more, over and over again. These aren't motivational tricks. They're methods of staying focused when your brain is no longer functioning like it should. Visualizations help too. Seeing the summit in your mind, remembering why you came, thinking about a loved one waiting at home. These thoughts become fuel when food and oxygen run out. But even the strongest minds start to crack. Some experience vivid hallucinations, talking to people who aren't there, seeing lights, hearing music. One climber swore he saw a warm hut just meters away from the summit. He walked toward it. There was nothing there. And when reality blurs, judgment disappears. That's how climbers end up wandering off cliffs, stripping off clothes, or simply sitting down and giving up. Because the death zone doesn't just attack the body, it invades your mind. Climbing Everest without oxygen isn't just a physical record, it's a psychological war, fought step by freezing step in the loneliest place on Earth. So let's ask the question again. What if you tried to climb Everest without oxygen? Let's say you're fit, motivated, maybe even trained. You make it to base camp. You begin your ascent. You feel the cold. The air thins. Your heart races. You keep climbing. And then you reach the death zone. Without oxygen, your body starts to break down. Every step takes everything you have. Your vision tunnels. You forget what you were doing. You stop to rest. But resting means getting colder, losing time, running out of life. At this point, unless you're among the rare few genetically or mentally prepared, you're already in trouble. Your oxygen saturation drops. Your brain starts slipping. And the worst part, you probably don't even realize how close you are to collapse. That's what makes the death zone so dangerous. It doesn't feel like a heart attack. It feels like peace, like lying down in the snow and closing your eyes, just for a moment, just to catch your breath. But it's never just a moment. It's how people die up there. The truth is, most of us wouldn't make it. Even seasoned climbers have failed. Some have died trying. But for those who do succeed, people like Reinhold Messner, it's not about conquering a mountain. It's about confronting the edge of human possibility and pushing past it. Because climbing Everest without oxygen isn't just a physical feat. It's one of the last real tests of human endurance, discipline, and willpower. And at the top of the world, when there's nothing left but snow, sky, and silence, that single gasping breath becomes the loudest declaration of what we're truly capable of. If you've made it this far, you now understand what it really means to climb Mount Everest without oxygen. It's not a stunt. It's not just a story of bravery. It's a story of survival, of limits, of facing death, and climbing through it anyway. So now ask yourself, would you ever try it? If you enjoyed this video and want more true, mind-blowing what-if scenarios from the real world, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment. Would you ever attempt Everest? And what challenge would you want us to explore next? Because out here, where breath is precious and every step could be your last, the mountain doesn't care who you are, but the story it tells through you, that can last forever.